Hey everyone, it's me, John. Welcome to another episode of BrainScratch for today, Friday, June 30th, 2017. It's already my favorite time of the week. Here we are. We've got a really interesting mystery to look into today, so let's just jump right into it. Today's case takes place around an area known as the Salish Sea. So from Wikipedia, let's learn a little bit about it. The Salish Sea is the intricate network of coastal waterways that includes the southwestern portion of the Canadian province of British Columbia and the northwestern portion of the U.S. state of Washington. So what's this case about? We're going to start with just a little bit of a blurb from The Guardian. British Columbia, Canada, is known for many things. Beautiful landscapes, great skiing, the 2010 Winter Olympics, and the human feet that have been washing up on its shores for the last 9 years. Since 2007, 12 human feet clad in running shoes have been found on the shores of British Columbia from Jedediah Island to Botanical Beach. So far, the provincial coroner's office has identified 8 of the 12. It had been nearly 4 years since a foot sighting, and then on the 7th of February in 2016, a new one washed ashore, discovered by a hiker along Vancouver Island's Botanical Beach. 5 days later, another one appeared. The coroner's office confirmed they were a pair. So let's hear a little bit more about this discovery. A family was hiking south of Port Renfrew at Botanical Beach. Charlotte Stevens said her husband was walking on piles of driftwood Sunday when he found a running shoe containing a sock and what appeared to be bones. Quote, "All you could see is about 3 inches of white material, and we were trying to determine if it was actual human bone or just something else placed inside," Stevens said. "It definitely looked like it, but we weren't going to take anything out of the shoe to find out." The grim discovery marked the 13th human foot found along the shores of BC and Washington since 2007, and the numbers fluctuate a little bit, but they basically get higher as we start looking through more sources here. Let's move to an article at the Washington Post. As more people learned about these discoveries, they attracted morbid scavengers to the Pacific Northwest shorelines, where the Salish Sea connects waterways along the west coasts of the United States and Canada. 16 of these detached human feet have been found since 2007 in British Columbia, Canada, and Washington State. Most of these have been right feet, which is really, really strange. I think only 2 of the 16 have been left feet. All of them have worn running shoes or hiking boots. The vast majority is running shoes. I think there's only 1, possibly 2 that are hiking boots. Among them, 3 New Balances, 2 Nikes, and an Ozark Trail. So what about theories on this? Well, speculation ranges from natural disasters such as the tsunami of 2004 to the work of drug dealers, serial killers, and human traffickers. One theory concerns a plane crash off Quadra Island 3 years ago with 5 men aboard. Only 1 of those bodies has been found. I watched a special on this. I believe it was on National Geographic Explorer. Basically, I think in all the cases, they've been able to extract DNA. So they've been using DNA to test against those other 4 missing men from the plane crash, and I don't believe that they have matched any of the feet that have been found. Other theorists believe the coastline is being used as a body dump for organized crime activity. A third scenario is a serial killer is at work. The official word from the authorities on this case: foul play is not suspected in any of the other cases. There's one case in particular where they know that someone had died from a boat. And I'm not sure if there was an accident or if they had fallen off the boat. But they're saying foul play is not suspected, though it hasn't been ruled out either. And Wikipedia does have its own article just on this specific event or phenomenon, the Salish Sea human foot discoveries. The feet belong to 5 men, 1 woman, and 3 other people of unknown sex. Of the 16 feet found, only 2 have been left feet. Both of those were matched with right feet. So essentially, both the feet were found for that one specific person. In addition, several hoax feet have been planted in the area. I really don't know what motivates people to do stuff like that. It's kind of unbelievable to me, but it does happen. As you can see here, they've got a whole grid breaking down each occurrence. So we're going to go through this so you have all the details. August 20th, 2007 is when the first one was found in Jedediah Island, British Columbia, Canada. A girl visiting from Washington picked up a size 12 Adidas shoe and opened the sock to find a man's right foot. It's thought to have become disarticulated due to submerged decay. That's a very important aspect of these cases because when you hear that there's a dismembered foot, the first thing you think is that maybe someone had cut the foot off. But I think there's only one of these cases where they believe that the foot was actually severed in that way. In all the other cases, they believe that the foot got to a point of natural decay, and apparently both the ankles and the wrists are kind of weak spots in terms of keeping your body together when it gets to that point. So in particular, if you're decaying within water, it's understandable that your hands and or feet might detach at some point during that process. So that's why you're going to see this phrasing about disarticulation over and over. This kind of shoe was produced in 2003 and distributed mainly in India. A man's right foot, size 12, white and blue mesh running shoe. The remains were identified as those of a missing man suffering from depression. This is also another trend that you're going to see as we're reviewing these stories. It seems like the authorities believe that many of these could be cases where people have decided to end their own life. So you'll probably notice that trend as we go through these as well. The second one was August 26, 2007, Gabriola Island, also in BC, Canada. Man's right foot, discovered by a couple, also disarticulated due to decay. It was waterlogged and appeared to have been taken ashore by an animal. It probably floated ashore from the south. The shoe, a size 12 white Reebok, was produced in 2004 and sold worldwide, but primarily in North America, and the type has since been discontinued. February 8th, 2008, Valdez Island, BC, Canada, a right foot in a size 11 Nike. The remains were identified as a 21-year-old Surrey man reported missing 4 years prior, whose death is considered not suspicious, indicating either misadventure or suicide. This type of shoe was sold in Canada and the United States between February 1st, 2003 and June 30th, 2003. It has been confirmed that the right foot found February 8th on Valdez Island and left foot found on June 16th on Westham Island belonged to the same man. And another reason why, as you're reviewing these, you're going to notice that they're talking about the manufacturer of the shoe is that is one of the key pieces of information in terms of determining how long that foot has been out there. People decompose in water very differently, and now you're considering that a part of the body is being wrapped up in a sock and a shoe where it's being kept away from some of the elements that might break it down. So you could literally have an extremely wide gap of time that body part is out there, and it can travel a significant distance now that we're talking about the buoyancy of a running shoe being wrapped around that. But we'll get more into those details as we roll forward on this. May 22nd, 2008, Kirkland Island, BC, Canada. A woman's right foot, blue and white New Balance sneaker. The fourth foot was discovered on an island in the Fraser Delta between Richmond and Delta, BC. It was also wearing a sock and sneaker. It is thought to have washed down the Fraser River, having nothing to do with the ones found in the Gulf Islands. The shoe was a New Balance sneaker manufactured in 1999. In 2011, the fourth sneaker found in Kirkland Island was identified as being part of a pair of blue and white New Balance sneakers belonging to a woman who jumped from the Patullo Bridge in New Westminster in April of 2004. June 16th, 2008, Westham Island, BC, Canada. A man's left foot was found by two hikers on June 16th, floating in water in Delta. It has been confirmed that the left foot found on June 16th on Westham Island and the right foot found February 8th on Valdez Island belonged to the same man. So that's the match for the one that we talked about 2 cases ago. August 1st, 2008, near Fist, Washington. I think that's how it's pronounced in the U.S. A right foot inside a man's black size 11 shoe was discovered by a camper on a beach. It was covered in seaweed. The site of the discovery was less than 16 kilometers from the international border in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Testing confirmed that the foot was human. Police say the large black top size 11 athletic shoe for a right foot contains bones and flesh. This was the first foot of the series to be found outside of British Columbia. The RCMP and Clallam County Sheriff's Department agreed on August 5th that the foot could have been carried south from Canadian waters. November 11th, 2008, Richmond, BC, Canada. A known woman's left foot in a shoe that was found floating in the Fraser River in Richmond. The shoe was described as a small New Balance running shoe, possibly a woman's shoe. A forensic DNA profiling analysis indicated that it was a genetic match to the foot discovered on May 22nd on Kirkland Island. So that's one that we haven't got to yet. October 27th, 2009, Richmond, BC, Canada. A right foot in a size 8.5 Nike running shoe on beach in Richmond. The remains were identified as a Vancouver area man who was reported missing in January of 2008 and died of natural causes. Now, I'm not sure at that point how you come to a conclusion that someone has died of natural causes if this is the only remains that you're finding. There's not enough body there to determine that. And we have that this man was reported missing. Of all the cases that we've reviewed so far, this one strikes me as possibly something could have gone on there. Now, could he have harmed himself? Possibly. But could someone else have done something with him and tried to hide him in the water? And through the decomposition process, his foot became detached and then was found later. I think that's also possible as well. And I just wanted to draw that out because it's tough when I look into cases where we're talking about multiple instances like this, and it's kind of easy to just look at it as data and kind of run right through it all. But we're talking about each of these is an individual instance. It's an individual person. And that's part of the reason why some of the coverage that I'm seeing on this case, where it seems like authorities are just defaulting to these people ended their own lives, I don't know if that is the best way to be looking into these cases. There could be that in these 16 instances, maybe there's just one, maybe there's a few that aren't that actual condition. Maybe there are people that were harmed in some way. And how can you tell when all you're working with is a shoe and, a foot? I'm really not certain. August 27th, 2010, Whidbey Island, Washington, U.S. A woman or child's right foot without a shoe or sock. This foot was determined to have been in the water for 2 months. Detective Ed Wallace of the Island County Sheriff's Office released a statement saying the foot would be tested for DNA. However, there was no match found in the National DNA Database. December 5th, 2010, Tacoma, Washington, found on the tidal flats. The right foot was still inside a boy's size 6 Ozark Trail hiking boot and likely belonged to a juvenile or small adult, police spokesman Mark Fulghum said Tuesday in Tacoma, about 40 kilometers south of Seattle and 225 kilometers south of Vancouver. So there we get the first one. That's the instance of a boot. There's at least one other boot that I'm aware of, but let's continue. August 30th, 2011, False Creek, BC, Canada, sex unknown. The foot was found in a man's white and blue size 9 runner, floating next to the Plaza of Nations Marina, attached to the lower leg bones. It had disarticulated naturally at the knee due to the water. So there Once again, we're talking about disarticulation, but for some reason, the way that this decomposition went, his lower leg bones actually came along with the foot, which I think that might be the only instance where that happens in this data. November 4th, 2011, Sasamat Lake, BC, Canada. A man's right foot inside a size 12 hiking boot was discovered by a group of campers in a pool of fresh water at Sasamat Lake near Port Moody. In January of 2012, this foot was identified by the BC Coroner Service as that of Stefan Zaharochko, a local fisherman who went missing in 1987. Police believe the foot separated naturally from the body and do not suspect foul play. So right there, first of all, this is a boot. So we're talking about another instance where it's not a running shoe. But this is a case from 1987, and that foot was found in 2011. So that should give you some idea of how long, particularly a foot within a shoe of some kind, can last while it's in the water. I mean, I think that's amazing that that they were even able to find those remains in that condition. Let's continue. December 10th, 2011, Lake Union, Seattle, Washington. Human leg bone and foot found in black plastic bag under the ship canal bridge. Okay, that one is very suspicious to me. I hope that they are not treating that as one of those cases of someone that just decided to end their life. January 26, 2012, Vancouver, BC, Canada. On January 26th, the remains of what appears to be human bones inside a boot were found in the sand along the water line at the dog park near the Maritime Museum at the foot of Arbutus Street in Vancouver. Then we take a jump of a couple years. May 6, 2014, Seattle, Washington. Human foot in white New Balance shoe found along the shoreline of Centennial Park near the Pier 86 grain terminal. The New Balance Model 622 athletic shoe was white with blue trim, size men's 10.5. This model of shoe was first available for sale in April of 2008. From an initial news photo, it appears to be a left foot. I think that's only the second occurrence of a left foot that we get. February 7th, 2016, once again, another gap of a couple years there. Vancouver Island, BC, Canada. Hikers on Botanical Beach near Port Renfrew on Vancouver Island found a foot in a sock and a running shoe. That's the story that we went into in a little more depth in one of the articles. And February 12th, 2016, a foot washed up near Port Renfrew on Vancouver Island. BC Coroner Service said it matches one found there 5 days earlier. So the matching foot to the one that the hikers had found. What about these hoaxes? One was discovered June 18th, 2008. It was a skeletonized animal paw, which was put in a sock and shoe and then stuffed with dried seaweed. There was another hoax after the 11th foot was found on August 31st, 2011. Several running shoes containing what police suspected was raw meat were found washed up on Oak Beach, British Columbia. Sounds like some people have a really bad sense of humor out there. Shaw Global News put this map together, and I just wanted to give you a sense of where all these occurrences are happening. And also from the color on these instances, we can see where they have basically figured out the identity of the person. And you can see in the majority of them, it's been identified. We only have one here where it's unidentified, but it is a match to this other foot that was found here. And then down here, we also have another condition like that where there are two instances found. They are a match to each other, but they still have not been identified yet. And I have to say, I'll have a link to the National Geographic Explorer episode. It's a YouTube link, and I don't think it's legit, so I'm not sure if it's going to stay there very long. So you might want to check that out sooner rather than later. The audio's been jacked with, so it kind of sounds like everyone's talking like munchkins in it. And I have to give you a pretty stiff warning. I got a little queasy during the first half of it. There is a lot of information going into what's known as body farms, locations where there are bodies that are decomposing for scientific purpose so that we can understand, what types of insects and what order the insects come into the decomposition process. It also goes into kind of an underwater version of a body farm. It's a little bit graphic, particularly in the first half, but they do have a lot of good detail about the early cases in particular, and how the investigators are going about trying to find these matches, including breaking it down to DNA. But then once they're running these DNA matches against their databases and they're not really getting anything, how they push it even farther, reaching out to families, trying to get DNA samples from family members and all that. Pretty interesting to see, especially on this side, looking at these cases, a decade later, that work seems to have paid off. We have, in the majority of these cases, there has been a match actually made to the identity of the person. Let's jump back to dailymail.co.uk for a little more detail. Here we actually have the boot of the fisherman whose boat overturned on January 5th in 1987 off the coast of Vancouver, and his remains were identified, they're saying last month, and this was in March of 2012. Just like I said, it's just amazing that they were able to get that information and put that together with the original source. The only reason the victims' feet survived is that they were all wearing rubber-soled shoes like trainers, which fish are unable to chew through. The mystery was solved by the coroner of British Columbia, who said that they were not victims of the Asian tsunami of 2004. So far, from what I've seen, there's no information that ties any of these people to the tsunami. Stephen Fonseca, who has worked each of these cases, also dismissed the theory that they were victims of a human trafficking ring, or that they might be stowaways who smuggled themselves onto a container ship as it left Vancouver. Mr. Fonseca put a team of 5 investigators onto the case to identify each person from their foot. No mean task, as feet cannot even tell you a person's race or age. The team cross-checked the locations where the feet were found with missing persons directories and even data on where the shoes were manufactured. Through painstaking work, they were able to work out the real story behind the mystery. Mr. Fonseca told the New York Post that most of the victims jumped from a bridge over the Fraser River, which flows into the Pacific Ocean at Vancouver. So here we're getting kind of the official word from the investigators that they do believe these occurrences are people jumping off a very specific bridge. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of detail to tell you why that belief is so strong from them. But they are also noting others could have been in accidents, but essentially there is no conspiracy theory. There's no one thing that is causing all these instances. However, if we jump over to another article at ctvnews.ca, the title of the article is "Ex-Cop Baffled by Severed Feet Mystery in BC." Another foot has washed up in British Columbia, the 11th found along the coastline in the last 4 years. Obviously, this is written back in 2011. But while BC officials say they don't consider any of the discoveries to be the result of foul play, a Toronto-based forensic expert is not so sure. Forensics consultant and former Toronto police detective Mark Mendelson says with this many feet being found in such a short period of time, he's suspicious something is up. I don't know whether you can look at this as just a coincidence. You have to ask yourself, why is this only happening on the West Coast? Why aren't those body parts floating up in Nova Scotia or St. John's or off the coast of New Jersey? Something is very, very strange here. He says it's true that a lot of people go missing in both Canada and the US who are never reported missing, part of the challenge in terms of matching up the DNA. But if all these feet belong to people who were suicide victims or died in float plane crashes or drownings, why are only feet showing up? Where are all the rest of the body parts? He says in his almost 30 years with the Toronto Police Service and his 15 years in homicide, he's done lots of investigations of bodies that turned up floating in waterways. Body parts do eventually make their way to the surface. So why are we only getting feet? Why are they only in running shoes? I'm not sure I buy the theory that it's because the shoe floats. A bit of an interesting counterpoint. I don't know. When I'm thinking about running shoes in particular, A lot of them, if they are truly running shoes, trying to keep the weight of the soles down has been kind of a big thing in running shoe technology for the past several years. As they're trying to do that, there are things like Nike Air where you have gases that could be injected into portions of the sole. You have different compounds that are being made that are much lighter in terms of their weight. I assume that would make them more buoyant as well. We do have two instances where we're talking about boots. One boot is from 1987, which certainly predates most of the popularity of Nike Air. Let me just move into the research that I have on the Nike Air stuff real quick. I found a very good article over at Gizmodo just about the history of Nike Air. And the first kind of pass at it actually happened in 1978. It was a NASA engineer, M. Frank Rudy, that developed this. But in terms of it being kind of popular, that came much later, which was in the mid 80s. And then, of course, with the Air Jordan all through the 90s. So they were around as early as 1980, but that would probably be mostly for elite athletes. I don't think that would necessarily be just for the average consumer. But even looking at that time frame, if they were popular towards the late 80s or let's say the 90s, why aren't there more cases that we're seeing from people from that time frame? We only have one case from that time frame, and it has nothing to do with a running shoe. So I kind of get it. I get the question that he's asking, but I also don't think that it is. I don't think it's any accident that running shoes in particular are the ones being found most often. Outside of the buoyancy factor, you have to talk about the design. It's easy for people to spot. You've got bright colors. You've got interesting design patterns that aren't quite natural, that won't blend in with the elements around them. So I think there's something to that in terms of how common it is to find running shoes versus other types of shoes, for example, boots and things like that might sink to the bottom, or if they didn't even sink to the bottom, if they did make it onto the shore and it's a brown boot and it's laying in wet sand, what are the chances that someone's actually going to spot that and actually recover that item? So very interesting questions on both sides of the conversation when it comes to this case. I went looking for other instances because one of the biggest points he raises is about that area. Why is it only happening in that particular area? So I went looking in a few different directions, and I couldn't really find occurrences in particular of feet popping up close to ocean sources or large bodies of water in mass, at least not in a concentrated number like that. And I did find one other instance here at checknews.ca. Man's body found Tuesday evening. Around 7:30 p.m., RCMP received a report of a body in the Salish Sea. RCMP Vancouver Island Integrated Major Crime Unit officers and the Royal Canadian Coast Guard recovered the body. Officials estimate it was in the water 24 hours. This is news literally from this week. So once again, we have remains found in that same body of water. There's no information here about the backstory. We don't know about this particular case. Is this someone that jumped off the bridge, or is this someone that was struggling with depression or anything like that? But we do have another instance of more remains being found in that area. In terms of feet in particular being found, I did find this article at dailymail.co.uk, which was talking about kind of a trend of feet being found. Third severed foot found in Cranswell Park area of Bath, that's in the UK, this week. Other feet believed to be from medical school. But once again, we're not talking about water in this instance. Seems like something odd is going on here. Seems like some type of morbid prankster. I'm really not sure, but this definitely doesn't fit the MO of the other instances, but it's one of the only cases I could find where you specifically have separated feet being found in some type of group, in some type of number, and this is only up to 3, much less than the 16 that we're talking about for that other area. So Is there a way to explain all this? I found a very interesting article at HuffingtonPost.com by Gary Rogers, who is a former homicide detective and a forensic coroner. I want to share a couple of the points with you. He also goes over a lot of the same information that was in the National Geographic video. So I would recommend that you give this a read, in particular if you don't want to see the graphic parts of that video. You'll get most of the same information about the investigation from this article. But in particular, when it comes to the shoes, a little internet research into running shoe technology confirms that by 2005, the footwear industry profoundly changed materials in their products. Where the lightweight designs were first developed for the high-priced athletic market, the chemical advancement of switching from polyurethane midsoles to ethylene vinyl acetate closed-cell blowing agents not only reduced the weight, but drastically reduced manufacturing and shipping costs. And what he's saying is that brought those types of shoes into much cheaper retail, for example, at Walmart. And he specifically cites several of the manufacturers that we heard about when we went through the list: Nike, Adidas, New Balance, Reebok. On top of that, why, this is a great question in this mystery, why are nearly 3/4 of the recovered runner wraps from the right? Why is it the right foot that is always being found? He says he got the answer from Professor Curtis Ebbesmeyer. Ebbesmeyer spent his lifetime studying ocean currents, including the aftermath of a shipping accident involving thousands of Nike runners being discharged into the Pacific during a storm. He says that left and right shoes behave differently due to their curvature. Lefts tends to drift in a clockwise pattern, and rights will turn counterclockwise. This contributes to a distribution pattern where the rights went to the closest land and the lefts possibly headed for the open ocean or perhaps to more deserted beaches. I don't quite fully understand that explanation. I don't know if the author really understood what he's saying there, because yes, obviously there's different curvature. However, the amount of curvature is exactly the same. I believe it would depend on the water mass that you're in and the flow of water there. It could be that, for example, if the water was flowing in one direction, that perhaps the left foot would spin in a circle, whereas the right foot would kind of work against the flow of that direction and get more of a straight path. But I don't know that that necessarily means that the rights would always go to the closest land. I'm not sure what the logic is behind that. So this explanation is a little weird for me. Ebbesmeyer also pointed out, with 90% of the population being right-handed, most people tend to tie their right shoe tighter than the left. And most people's right foot is slightly larger than their left. So the assumption there is that the left foot could get dislodged from the shoe a lot more easily, and that's why we're finding more of the right shoes. 90% of the population is being right-handed. That's pretty easy to verify. Does that mean that people tie their right shoe tighter? I don't know. That's once again something that kind of hits me weird, because when I'm tying my shoes, I use both my hands. So why would I have an inclination to do one tighter than the other necessarily? I don't really understand all of that. If you guys have some insight or some more thought on that, please share it in the comments below, because we're talking about an expert here. I'm assuming that he's making some very good points, but for some reason, when I'm trying to run those points through my logical mindset, I'm having trouble understanding them. So first of all, do you guys think the left and right curvature really has something to do with getting the shoe towards the mainland? And second, do you think that people tie their right shoelaces tighter than the left? It sucks, because now I want to test that, but now that I'm aware of it, I know that I'm going to skew my own results. So anyway, very good article. And of course, in the links below, I will have the National Geographic video. But like I said, you might want to try to get to that quick, because it's certainly not an official posting on the video. All right, Brain Scratchers, this is where I turn it over to you. What do you guys think? Is there something else going on to this case? I'll tell you what I struggle with is the assumption that these are instances of people just jumping from that bridge. if that's the case, I would hope the authorities would get some type of monitoring on that bridge, get a video camera with a motion sensor up there. We have cameras for like game trap cameras nowadays where you can strap them to a tree, and anytime something moves, photos are automatically taken. If that bridge is that dangerous, get something like that on the bridge so you can monitor what's going on out there, and maybe put that footage together with the DNA profiles that you're finding in these feet. What is pretty apparent, I think, is there is definitely a trend that's happening up there. If it is a natural trend, I expect it to continue. So I do think they should try to think of some other safeguards where maybe they can at least track what's going on or keep people safe from that bridge in some way, if they do think it's that one specific bridge. On the flip side, I do have to consider what that ex-cop was saying, the questions that he was raising. Is there something else going on here? Could someone be taking advantage of this whole myth that's kind of built up around this now? I mean, if you were going to dispose of a body, why wouldn't you dispose of it in that waterway and, hopefully fall under the same presumption that the authorities are making with the other cases, if that body is found or if parts of that body is found, that this is someone that decided to end their own life. I don't know. I really don't know. But you have a really interesting phenomenon going on there. Running shoes seems to be a big part of it. And just thinking about, with that one case in particular from 1987, how far can these shoes be traveling? I mean, with that much time being in the water, and especially if they're in a more buoyant shoe. Remember, he was in a boot from 1987, so that was nowhere near the type of buoyancy that we have in shoes now. Is it possible that you could wind up with the foot of a victim from an entirely different country, or maybe even a different continent? I think it's certainly possible. But I have to say that it does look to me like Canadian authorities have done an excellent job in terms of tracking down the DNA and making matches so that they could identify where those people are coming from. The thing I question is, are they doing a great job in understanding that? I mean, just because you talk to those families and they say, yeah, they were kind of struggling with depression or they were having trouble in their life, is that enough to really draw the conclusion, well, they must have ended their own life then, when all you're looking at is a foot in a shoe? I don't know. That's a bit of a tough one for me. But I'm looking forward to seeing your comments on it in the comment box below. And please, as always, let's be respectful to these cases. Each one of these cases is a person, but combined, there's definitely a strange trend that's going on here, and I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. So I think it's something we should definitely be aware of and maybe keep our eyes on. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on today's Brain Scratch. I hope you had a very nice week. I hope you have a great weekend, and come right back here on Monday to join me back here on the Lord and Arch channel. I'll see you there. Take care.